Well, Kyle, welcome to the show. It's great to have you on here. It's always great to have the candidates for CD1 on our show. And it is good. I think it's good that the candidates come out and talk right, directly to the people. Uh, I know you've done some stump stuff up here, but this will get gets out to a larger audience than normally the stump speech. So I'm glad to have you on.
I appreciate you having me.
Well, great. The first question I always like to ask the candidates: why the heck are you running? It's a tough gig running for office. I don't think people realize that. So, give us a give us an idea. Why why are you here? Why are you running?
Sure. I think that I hope like you said, it's a very difficult job, especially when you're talking about a district like CD1 here in Michigan. I think it's second largest distance or a second largest district by landmass in, I think, east of the Mississippi. And so it's a lot of empty space. You're talking to a diverse group of people. And really, I hope people understand that there's an inherent desperation when someone is running for office, that they really want to see something happen in the world, or oftentimes that's the case. That's definitely the case for me. For me, I see my rural hospitals closing or reducing services the entirety of my life, operating under a system that has been eroding, sagging under its own weight for a long time. I believe that healthcare should be treated as a human right in this country. And so as part of that, I believe that Medicare for all should be on every single congressional ballot in the country until we join the rest of the developed world in providing universal comprehensive healthcare that's free at the point of service. And so that's really one of the biggest motivators in doing this. And then there's any number of other things that cause you to want to jump into that race. Me as an architect, I'm an architect by trade. I would compare architects with maybe teachers and doctors, or prospective teachers and doctors, in this expectation that your vocation, or through your vocation, you are going to be able to meaningfully improve people's lives, that you're going to create spaces that affect them positively. And you learn that going through architecture school. It's a really unique education in the way that you compete with other individuals, you collaborate with people, that they have this crucible of critique and understanding. And really, at its heart, what you're trying to do is not to engineer some kind of artifact, but you're trying to create a place that is housing human activity. And what I found is that the realities of practice show me that I can take a 100-year-old storefront building back and restore it, but I can't ensure that the people that work there can afford to shop there. I can renovate an emergency department in a hospital, but I can't ensure that the people that go there for care don't leave there with crippling medical debt. That I can design beautiful $6 million homes for the wealthiest people in our society, but I can't house people en masse within my own income bracket or the people that need it the most. And so uh, there's a learned frustration that comes from that, and it really is desperation in its purest form. And so I'm running largely because I didn't see my values reflected on either side of the ballot yet. And I believe that we need to drastically improve the lives of working class people, both here in northern Michigan and across America.
It's been, I think it's common knowledge that the Democrats really walked away from rural America. In other words, they haven't done a good job to support rural America like they've done historically. Um, how can you make the party brand feel sort of practical and service focused? I mean, how can you get to those root issues that drove a lot of people, especially in the UP, away from the party?
I think it's a lot of it is turning down partisanship. It's when you there are a certain number of people in our country that certainly identify as Republicans first, or identify as Democrats first. but most people are working class people. In most cases, we have a shared struggle. We have shared problems and a common cause, and in many cases, a common enemy. And that is those that have infinitely more power than any of us. And what happens is they divide us into various different boxes, whether that be party boxes or boxes that are stratified by income, or boxes that are subdivided by the whether your collar is white or blue. And they do these things in order to divide your most powerful subsect of people, which is the working class. And I believe that the Democratic Party has participated in that. I think that for too long, the Democratic Party has been paternal and patronizing. They've participated in this selling of this belief that better is impossible, and the best thing that you can hope for is that things remain largely static, while the other party is working to kind of erode your conditions. And I put it like this often: is if we are in a duopoly and it's a lemonade business, right? And we're going to set up one party's going to set up their lemonade stand on one corner, and the other party's going to set up their lemonade stand on the other corner. If one party is going to exclusively sell bags of crap, then as long as you sell lemonade, you'll be fine. And for too long, I think the Democratic Party has said, we're selling bags now, 50% less crap, and being surprised when people see that as a disingenuous exercise. And so I believe that what we need candidates who are proposing to drastically, meaningfully improve people's lives so that there's actually stakes here. You're not going to, 10 years into Donald Trump, finally have negative partisanship kick in and do its job. You need to go about the process of democracy for the purpose of improving people's lives, not just winning elections.
One of the things when I was up in the UP most recently, which I mentioned to you earlier in the program, was probably back in October, and a lot of the towns have been decimated. Obviously, the copper companies came in, took what they wanted, and left the region many years ago. How do we bring the young people and the workers back to the rural towns? What do you do?
I mean, we have a beautiful playground up here. I mean, Northern Michigan is one of the most beautiful regions in the world, not just America. I mean, we have so much freshwater coastline. We have so much forests and state and national park. I mean, like, we have this abundance of resources in places where people actually really want to live. Then the question is, where is the industry? Where are the things, the jobs to help people? And what I found through the course of my life is that we're always in this state of precarity. And it's because an industry can come exploit us and leave very easily, or that things like mining have a timeline, right? They have an expiration date, and that leaves us tremendously vulnerable. But at a time when we should be able to work remotely and people should be able to have more mobility, they don't have that. What we equate to freedom in this country isn't really freedom, because you're not free so long as you are bound by employer provided healthcare. You're not free so long as you can't move to an area where you have rural hospital systems reducing services, short staffing their nursing, not providing adequate care, and then potentially closing outright. You can't grow as an employer in some of these communities. And I'm Mayor Pro Tem here in Iron Mountain. We're blessed by having a lot of great employers here. But if our hospital systems can't provide the care that people need, they'll close, and then that community dies. Not only do they lose the employment of that hospital and the care, but they lose the ability to entice new hires to come to the area. And it's the same thing when it comes to education. If we cannot provide a high baseline for people's existence in places like rural Michigan, they will not move there. And even though we should be in a golden age of remote work and allowing people to have a greater freedom to move about this country and live where they want and live where there's a space to be, we don't have the infrastructure to do that because we don't have rural broadband in the areas that we need it here in northern Michigan.
Yeah, which brings up a question that that's really hitting the country, particularly in Kalkaska recently. You may or may well, you are familiar with the situation. Great. They wanted to move a big data center there. If you look at if you look at the UP, you'd say let's just make it all one big data center, right? Well, the residents really in Kalkaska County really raised a lot of questions, a lot of concerns. What are your thoughts about these large data centers that want to move into rural areas? What are your thoughts?
I tend to oppose data centers. When it comes to AI in general, what AI has become is instead of that Star Trek future that we're all promised, where the more we automate things, the easier the jobs of the working class get to be, and we get more leisure time and we're more prosperous. Instead, what we see is that's a means of undermining our collective will as a working class, and it's used to replace so many of us and then create additional wage competition and do these other things. So that's the AI component of it. And then when you look at the infrastructural requirements of some of these data centers, it really is it's as parasitic an entity as I can imagine. Really, you plop down this building, billions of dollars, it demands a gigawatt or more of power to run. It has very little employment besides the construction related to the creation of that. We're in this rush to subsidize this for some reason. And really all that's doing is it's using up our natural resources. It's overburdening our energy grid. It's driving up our costs. It has the potential to use up or pollute our water sources. It's using up our land, and it's providing very little in return other than enough rope for the capitalists to kind of hang us with, right? It's empowering them with our own intellectual property. It's empowering them with our lack of personal copyright, and it's allowing them to really take what they want with zero regulation. And so absolutely, you talk about putting that in Kalkaska or anywhere in the Upper Peninsula, I'm absolutely opposed to us accommodating that. And especially when we're asked to accommodate that, like in Kalkaska on public lands, or anywhere where Michigan taxpayer dollars or U.S. taxpayer dollars are on the line.
I know healthcare is a big topic with you. What do you think universal healthcare coverage would look like in your isolated counties? And you've got isolated counties. You've got to be concerned about that.
Oh my God, the easiest pitch for universal healthcare is just describing the system that we live under right now. Outside of the fact that we're the only developed nation in the world that doesn't provide universal health care to its citizens, and the fact that we pay about twice per capita what the rest of the world pays for our health care, sometimes up to 10 times or more the price that the rest of the world pays for their prescription drugs. Then you throw in the actual logistical hurdles or the realities of seeking healthcare in this country. I'm in the central Upper Peninsula. I'm right along the Wisconsin border. I've seen our rural hospitals close down. I've seen the distance between care facilities grow and grow throughout the entirety of my life. When I'm an adult man and I graduate from college and my wife and I have student loan debt and you're on an ACA plan, you get a Blue Cross Blue Shield bronze plan, right? The bronze, the greatest plan, right? And what that looks like is it looks like it's $1,900 a month for a family of four, right? That's an insane amount of money. But good news, we have ACA subsidies. And so through advanced tax credits, what we're going to do is, hey, you can afford to maybe pay $600 a month. And so you pay $600 a month, and the federal government will pick up $1,600 or $1,300 a month as part of these advanced tax credits. And there, you have healthcare, right? Well, when you have a maximum family out of pocket of $16,000, you don't really have healthcare. You're paying for this catastrophic care plan. And then when you dice up the country into these networks that are defined by state lines usually, and you're in the Western Upper Peninsula, what that looks like is when you need care, when you need a specialist. My kid, one of my kids has, glasses. Another kid has an orthopedic condition that he needed to see a specialist with. My options were to drive down to Detroit, which is 9 hours away, or I can go out of network to go to Green Bay or Appleton or Milwaukee, right? But you leave that network, you cross that invisible threshold, and now you functionally have no health care because that maximum out of pocket has now gone from $16,000 to $32,000. And oh, by the way, it resets at the beginning of every year. And so you look at that and you go, do you have health care? You're covered. The federal government is paying for this through advanced subsidies. You're paying for it out of pocket. Do you have health care coverage? And the answer is no, you don't.
One final question, and it reverberates down here in the LP. And folks that don't know what LP is, that's the Lower Peninsula, and the UP is euphemistically called the Upper. Or yeah, UP. It's called the Upper Peninsula. Uh, Home ownership. I mean, it's expensive down here, and it's got far more expensive up in the UP. Believe it or not. What would your plan be to make home ownership affordable again for young families or people that want to move up to the UP?
Oh, it's an excellent question. I mean, I think that you see right now that you have hedge funds and private equity buying up desirable homes in desirable places so that they can use them as rental properties. You have these large entities that are able to outcompete the average person for these single family residences, and then they just turn around and they leech the rent off of them. They have them as short-term rentals and those sorts of things. So what we've done is we've essentially allowed the billionaire class, the investment class, to commoditize our housing that we need here in Northern Michigan, so that they can turn that into an investment vehicle. I would absolutely support, and there's legislation in Congress right now to ban hedge funds from buying single family residential so that you have that housing stock preserved for the American working class, because that's how we have traditionally grown household wealth, is through home ownership. And the other way that I look at housing is that, because it's all a pipeline, right? Is that you as a young individual might be a renter, and that's fine while you're in your more transitory years and figuring yourself out and with jobs and everything else like that. As you grow and you want stability, what you need is the funds to be able to buy a home. And too often what we've done is we've cut out our legs right from the jump because our rents are too damn high. And one thing that I look at is it starts at the bottom end of affordability. A lot of people don't know this, and I'm going to get granular here, but in 1999, with bipartisan support, we passed something that was called the Faircloth Amendment. It was included in a greater suite of housing bills. And what that effectively did was it prohibited the federal government from creating public housing. It's frozen at 1999 baseline levels. Those 1999 baseline levels are divided into thousands of public housing authorities. So when they come offline, we're not able to take stock that's available in one area and put it in another area where we have the need. It just remains fallow. And instead, what we have done is we've employed a system called low-income housing tax credits, which instead what it does is, instead of providing deep affordability like public housing used to do, low-income housing tax credits provide limited affordability, limited scale, which means in a building that has 100 housing units, you might have 30 of them that are affordable. And what it does is it creates an incentive structure where everybody, through the development of that project, the realtor, the architect, the developer, the management company, everybody gets their profit at the end. And what we end up with is we have a property that has limited affordability, a timeline, which is 30 years, but after 15 years, there's an out clause where if you want to pay a particular penalty, you can take those off of the affordable books. And what it does is, unlike, carbon credits, where a bad actor is able to buy carbon credits from a good actor and it's transitory like that, low income housing tax credits remain with the property. So what it forces you to do is it forces you to sell or transfer that property to an entity that has a higher tax demand, right? So we've created this mechanism effectively where HUD pays private companies to develop buildings that have limited affordability on a ticking clock as for how long that affordability needs to last. And in order to take advantage of that program, they need to transfer ownership over to those properties to private equity. And so now we have a cliff where so much of our affordable housing stock is about to leave that affordability window, and those properties are inherently in the hands of private equity. And so I absolutely support repealing the Faircloth Amendment so we can actually devote the resources of the federal government to create deep affordability where we need it, at the scale we need it, and start treating the housing crisis here in Northern Michigan and elsewhere in the country like the crisis that it is.
Super. Okay, we're going to swing into 2026. And as we get closer to August, here I am, a UP voter, an LP voter, whatever, and I've got the ballot in front of me, and I say to myself, who am I going to vote for here? What would you tell them? What would you tell them why to vote for Kyle?
I tell them that I'm their working class brother, that we have infinitely more in common than we have apart, that it's us not against each other as neighbors, but it's us against the people who are infinitely more powerful in our society, that we need class consciousness before anything else, that we need to talk through the partisanship and have as anti-partisan a campaign as possible, and that ultimately my goal is to drastically improve the lives of people in Northern Michigan. And that's it. That's all I'll ever set my mind about, is trying to drastically improve their lives by providing them healthcare, housing, living wages, and a dignified retirement.
Super, super. Well, Kyle, as the campaign begins to heat up, I hope you'll get a hold of your campaign manager and come back on the show, and I'm sure we'll have other issues to talk about. I certainly appreciate you coming on and talking to the people of Grand Traverse County.
I really appreciate you taking the time and having me on. Thanks a lot.
Sure thing.